بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Welcome to this new class on some aspects of the Fard'ain, meaning the individual obligations when it comes to fiqh or the Islamic law, which we've called devotional guidance because of maybe the negative connotations that Islamic law has taken amongst the people, in that some people actually have come to fear it, even though it is absolutely nothing to be feared at all. We're going to be talking in this class about tahara, meaning ritual purity, about prayer, and about fasting. So when I say some aspects of Fard'ain or individual obligations, is that we're not going to cover all of them, and we're not going to cover everything that there is to know about the things that we are going to cover. So basically there is more to the Fard'ain than tahara, prayer, and fasting, and there's more to these three things that we'll see in this class, inshallah. So the idea is just to do an initiation for the beginners, and maybe the people who have an intermediate level may be able to benefit from this. And then after that, further studies are required to reach the Fard'ain in fiqh. Now, I've already done an introduction on what is fiqh and why we should study it, and what is the history of fiqh, and what is a madhab, meaning a school of fiqh, and why we should follow a school of fiqh, and what are the principles that fiqh is based upon, at least the principles that we need to know when we study fiqh itself, such as the five rulings, meaning what is wajib, what is mandub, what is mubah, what is makruh, and what is haram. So basically the rulings come in five main categories: that which is obligatory, and that which is recommended, that which is simply permissible, that which is disliked, and that which is prohibited. And the obligation and the recommendations fall into two branches: that which is for everybody, and that which is for the community. So when one person does it or a group does it, then it's no longer obligatory or recommended for the others. So this, I have a document on Google Classroom, because this class is given simultaneously live in this masjid, but also there are a number of people that are following it on the internet. So the class is recorded. You see the laptop recording here, and after the class, my intention is to post them on the same day, to upload them on YouTube. And then the people who were present and want to watch the class again, in case they missed something, and the people that can't make it here because they live in another city or another country, or they had to work or something, will be able to watch the class. So anybody who's here who hasn't signed up should give me their Gmail email address if they have one. If not, I recommend that the people sign up for a Google account, and that will allow them to be added to the classroom, and then you can have access from there to the videos of the class, because even though I say they're on YouTube, they're not public. They're just they're unlisted, so you have to have the URL, the link to the video. And also, that will be the place to ask questions. So underneath the post of the video, there should be a place to add comments, and that could be the place to ask questions, and that's where I can answer them as well. Also, when you're registered on Classroom, you can get the emails that I send out if there's any announcements to make. And there's also the link for our WhatsApp group, which is for communications, like important communications only. Now, if people do want to discuss things that are specifically linked to the class on the WhatsApp group, I'm not against that, as long as it doesn't become like a chat room with where there's too much messages and then people don't end up reading it because it's too much to keep up with. But if it's a specific questions that you want to ask me, that it should be done on the Google Classroom page, and I will make a tutorial, inshallah, and post it on the Google Classroom where I'll explain how the Classroom works and where I post what, inshallah. So also on the Classroom page, that there's a tab called About, and this is where you can find the book that we'll be studying in this class. So for the English group, we have the Arabic version of the book, and we have an English translation that was done by a friend and colleague from South Africa, and that I've had a chance to meet with in Fez a few times. So the book is called al-Ashmaawiyyah, and it is I believe it's about 500 years old. It was written by an Egyptian Maliki scholar, because the Maliki school, even though it has somewhat disappeared from Egypt with the precedence of the Shafi'i madhab is now the most abundant one in Egypt. There's still a lot of Maliki scholars there, and there has always been since the very beginning of the spread of the school outside of Medina, which was the city where Imam Malik himself, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, lived all his life. So this book is the first book, I believe, in Egypt for those that are the beginning students of the Maliki school. The first thing they're given to learn is this book, al-Ashmaawiyyah. Now, where I studied in West Africa, in Senegal, this is the second book they teach. They have a very vast curriculum of fiqh, and they start with Akhdari, Mukhtasar al-Akhdari, and then the second one is Matn al-Ashmaawiyyah. So for those of you who are not familiar yet with who I am, so my name is Ali Abdullah Galant. I'm from Moncton, New Brunswick. So right now, for those that are watching online, we're in the mosque in Moncton, New Brunswick. It's a small city on the east coast of Canada. There's not a whole lot of Muslims here, not a whole lot of institutions, no imam, no scholars that we know of in our province. So it's a very virgin land. There's still much to do here. Alhamdulillah, may Allah illuminate this land and open the doors of barakah and bounty, and may He guide people of these lands towards Him. Ameen. Ameen. So so basically I accepted Islam 10 years ago, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the drive to want to learn and study this religion. So I've been studying for about 7 years now. Studied a little bit in Yemen to learn Arabic, and then 4 years in Senegal where I studied a variety of sciences, but with a focus on Maliki fiqh, and have permissions to teach from my sheikh and from my ustad over there. It's just a general ijaza for the Maliki school, but specifically the text that I've studied over there. including al-Ashmaawiyyah, the book that I'll be teaching starting today in this class, inshallah. And then I lived a year and a half in Fez, did some studies there, some teaching, and now I just moved back to Moncton, where I'm working on a book on Maliki fiqh. It's called The Student's Guide to Maliki fiqh. It's a very detailed book that will be good for more advanced students, but also people who want the details with which they can practice the rulings, like such as the rulings we'll learn today. There's not a whole lot of detail in books like that. You need to have the whole picture sometimes to be able to get it right. So what I can do, inshallah, is every time we do a lesson that has something to do with what's covered in the book that I'm writing, I could potentially post that in the About section where the book is posted, and then students can refer to that if they need more explanations and more details. But that being said, the focus in this class should be on the Matn al-Ashmaawiyyah, because if we're teaching a beginner's class, the other book will be too much for most. So I'm writing this book. Now I'm teaching these classes in the masjid, and I'm still studying online. So which brings me to the next point, which is the point about the financial contributions. So this class is free. I wouldn't ask somebody to make a contribution, but I will just highly encourage it. Why? Because basically I'm dedicating all my time to the pursuit of knowledge and the teaching, the spreading of the knowledge, and that of course doesn't allow me to have a regular income from jobs. So this is the reason why I'm asking for the financial contributions. It can be anything that you're able to contribute. It'll help you on one hand to be able to commit to this class. So first of all, check out the class if you think it's suitable for your needs. Then if you want to commit to it, I definitely suggest making a contribution. It will make you more committed, and alhamdulillah, it helps me be able to do this, because that's what's going on in the ummah today. We have people that want to study, that want to become scholars, but they have a lot of financial barriers that are preventing them from doing that. And the communities generally don't see this as a priority, but it is a priority, because that's the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets, peace be upon them all, and in particular of our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So if there's nobody that's there to follow in the footsteps, then the knowledge will slowly be lifted from the world, as our Prophet ﷺ warned us in the end times that the knowledge would disappear with the death of the scholars, and this is happening right now. And there's not that many people that are there that are able to step up and walk in their steps and keep the torch alive. So this is why it's important to support projects like this. And the money will be going to help pay the rent of my office and the tuition for my classes and similar things. So it's definitely a good cause. So there's a donation box here in the mosque in the back, and if you want to do it electronically, or if you don't live in Moncton, we have a website. It's called majlisfatih.com. It's the name of our organization. So majlisfatih.com, and that's there's no triple W's before. And on that page we have a donate button. If you go to the donate section, there's a PayPal option. So either you can make a one-time contribution or a recurring monthly contribution, and you can select anything between $10 and $50 Canadian per month. I recommend 20, but that's just my recommendation. If you can't afford that, that's no problem. And if you can't afford anything at all, that's no problem. Okay, so enough about that. So as I was saying, there's an intro on fiqh, madhabs, and principles of fiqh on the Google Classroom page. So I would recommend that you go and read them. If that's too much for you, I did a summary even of that document, and I think maybe it's like 7 pages or something like that now with the summary. So if you're not able to, don't have time to read every document, just read that and it'll give you a good idea about the context of what we're doing here. So my teaching method, what I'll be doing is reading the Arabic text, and then I'll be translating. I'll be given a rough on-the-spot translation. Now, if you want to follow in the English translation that's available, you're more than welcome to do that. And as a matter of fact, if you do so, I would recommend that you print it out so that you can maybe change some of the words, because translations are very rough attempts at giving the meaning, and sometimes there's a word that would be maybe preferable. So if you can note my preferences on the page too, and that'll give you, it will enrich your understanding, inshallah. So after my rough translation, then I'll give an explanation of the rulings that were, and add extra things that are not said in the text, inshallah. So the recommended study method would be to print the book from the Google Classroom, and if you live in Moncton, we'll offer a printing and binding service for a donation of $10. You can get either the English or the Arabic or both for $10 per book. Okay, so once you have the book printed, then it'd be good to read ahead. Now I know this week probably was difficult because people here didn't know necessarily what book we were doing or where to get it. So I would recommend re-listening to not necessarily the intro, but the part where we'll be actually covering the fiqh, and go back and take notes on paper. And after that, you study your notes, you reorganize them if you need to, and finally, this step is something that I'm pretty adamant about, is you should teach somebody else, anybody that's willing to listen to you, whether it be your mother, your father, your brother, your son, your daughter, your friend. And if you can't find anybody, then just speak to the wall. It will really, really help you figure out if you really understood the text, and then some questions might come up which you can ask your teacher later, but you won't know that you haven't understood it until you try to explain it to someone else. And when you do try to explain it, it has the effect of, it roots the knowledge inside your mind more than other techniques. This is what I've found to be beneficial for me, and other people have testified the same. Alright, so I think we're ready to start the book. So I have a different version here. I have the version that I had studied in Senegal. So the page numbers wouldn't be the same. So it's where the author starts speaking. So I'll have to look. I'm sure you can find in the Arabic version that's on the Google Classroom. There's a lot of introductory text. I recall it doesn't start until at least like 15-20 pages into the text. And the same thing with the English translation. There's a little bit of introductory remarks from the translator before the text actually starts. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. قال الشيخ الإمام العالم العلامة عبد الباري العشماوي الرفاعي رحمه الله تعالى سألني بعض الأصدقاء أن أعمل مقدمة في الفقه على مذهب الإمام مالك بن أنس رضي الله عنه فأجبته إلى ذلك راجيا للثواب. So he says after the Basmala, قال الشيخ الإمام العالم العلامة. So the Shaykh, the Imam, the scholar, the great scholar Abdul Bari al-Ashmaawi. This is the name of the author, Abdul Bari, and al-Ashmaawi would be what we call the last name in today's language. Al-Rifa'i would be his tariqah in the tasawwuf, because it was not uncommon for scholars to give their affiliation with their school of aqidah, with their school of fiqh, and with their tariqah of tasawwuf. Because for those of you who are familiar with the hadith of Jibril alayhi salam, when he came disguised as a man in white clothes, the scholars have derived from this hadith that the religion is either 3 or 4 parts, and for those that say it's 3, it is the iman, the Islam, the ihsan. So which, with the sciences of the religion that were based upon these 3 elements, it would correspond with aqidah for the iman, with fiqh for the Islam, and with tasawwuf for the ihsan. So the scholars would give which school and which path that they belong to. So this scholar did not mention his aqidah lineage, but almost all Malikis followed the Ash'ari school of aqidah, so maybe he didn't feel the need to mention it. And because this book is in the field of Maliki fiqh, then it would be obvious that he's Maliki in madhab, so he just specified his tariqah in tasawwuf, because there is no specific tariqah for the Malikis. There an abundance of them. Then he says, rahimahullah ta'ala. I'm not sure if this is the author himself who wrote this, or if it's his students when they copied the manuscript to add the dua for the Shaykh, that Allah have mercy upon him. Allah the Most High may have mercy upon him. So then the text begins. He says, and also perhaps, the قال الشيخ الإمام. Usually when the texts start with this, it's not the scholar himself who wrote this, it's his students, because as you can see, there's a magnification, al-Imam, al-Alim, al-Allama. The scholars don't praise themselves like this. They usually say قال الفقير إلى رحمة ربه. They start with things that show humility. So chances are this was written by his students. But now the words of the Shaykh definitely start here when he says, سألني بعض الأصدقاء. So a friend asked me, أن أعمل مقدمة, that I make an introductory text, في الفقه, on the topic of fiqh, على مذهب الإمام مالك بن أنس رضي الله عنه, on the madhab of Malik ibn Anas, the Imam, which is Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him. فأجبته إلى ذلك, so I answered, in the affirmative concerning this, راجيا للثواب, and hoping in the reward, meaning the divine reward. So basically he's just explaining to us how he ended up writing this book, is that a friend asked him to write an introductory text on Maliki fiqh. And the introduction just ends there, very short, clear. He just wants to get to the point. So he starts immediately with what the nullifiers of Wuduu, nawaqid al-Wuduu. Usually the scholars start with the categories of water, and then they might talk about purifying from najasa, and then they might talk about how to make wudu, and then they talk about what nullifies wudu. But he started with what nullifies wudu, and then he'll tell you what water you can use for the wudu and how to make wudu. So that's how he chose to do it. So he says, Babu Nawaqidil Wuduu. Babu Nawaqidil Wuduu means the chapter on the nullifiers of wudu. I'lam waffaqak وفقك الله تعالى أن نواقض الوضوء على قسمين. So he says, no, he speaks to us. No, may Allah the Most High grant you success or tawfiq, that the nullifiers of wudu can be divided in two categories. أحداث وأسباب أحداث. So the first category is أحداث, which is the plural of hadath, and the second one is أسباب أحداث, which asbab is the plural of sabab, which means cause, and of hadath, ahdath. So you have hadath and causes of hadath. So what is a hadath? So the definition that they give, and the translated version would be the normal emission of the substances that are normally emitted through the genitals or the anus. So basically this definition excludes a whole wide array of things. So if he says emission, so anything that enters the genitals or the anus does not break wudu. Now we're not talking about sexual intercourse here, because that's something else that you learn about when you learn about what requires ghusl. So that would be considered a major hadath. So here we're talking about minor hadath, the things that require wudu only. So anything that comes inside will not break the wudu. Also, it has to be a normal substance. So if you have a worm or a gallstone, forget what they're called, a kidney stone that comes out of there, that doesn't break wudu. And it also has to be normal emission. So if it's a normal substance but it doesn't come out of the right place, such as urine from the anus or gas from the genitals, that will not be considered a hadath. And then another meaning of the normal emission is that if it's an abnormal emission, like incontinence, if it's half the time of the day or more, that will not break wudu either. And if we talk about what comes out of the genitals and the anus, then it also excludes what comes out of other orifices, such as the mouth. So vomiting, for example, would not break wudu. So that's what we mean by hadath. I hope it's more clear. So basically it's the emission. So we're going to learn things like urine, for example. And when we talk about urine, it's not the actual urine that breaks the wudu, it's the urination, it's the emission of it. So that's hadath, and the cause of hadath is something that does not fall under the definition of hadath, but it could either lead to a hadath, or it could a person could have a hadath during this cause and they wouldn't be aware of it. And this will make more sense once we learn what the causes are. But an example would be falling asleep. So a person could pass gas during their sleep and they wouldn't know it. So even though they didn't necessarily pass the gas, just the mere fact of falling into a deep sleep breaks wudu and is considered a cause of hadath. Now it's not all the causes of hadath that break wudu. It's the ones that the jurists have highlighted in the books, and there's only a handful of them, which we'll see. So anything else it does not break wudu if it's not mentioned here or in the Student's Guide to Maliki Fiqh, because there may be some things that are not mentioned in this book, but I mentioned them in that book. فَأَمَّا الْأَحْدَاثُ فَخَمْسَةٌ. So he starts with naming the different types of hadath. So he says as far as the hadaths are concerned, they are 5. In my book you'll find there are actually 9. ثَلَاثَةٌ مِنَ الْقُبُلِ. So he says 3 of them are from the front, meaning from the genitals. And in my book I have named 6, or actually 7 from the front. وهي المذي والودي والبول. So he names madhi, wadi, and urine. So madhi is the pre-ejaculatory fluid for men. So basically, if a man is aroused, it can lead to the production and emission of madhi, which is a clear white, sort of stretchy, sticky liquid. And in women, it does exist from a fiqh point of view as well. So it'd be the liquid that is produced and emitted through the vagina as a result of arousal. Even though it may not be biologically different from the other fluid, the fluid that's produced from the vagina for other reasons. Wal-wadi, the wadi is it's a thick white liquid that can rarely, it's a rare thing, be produced after male urination when there's been like a very hard physical effort, such as heavy lifting. So it's not a normal thing, but it can happen. So if a man, for example, lifted something heavy and then made his wuduu, and then after that he saw this white thick liquid that came out of his urethra, that would break his wuduu. Wal bawl, urination, that's well known, doesn't really require any explanation. Now he talks about the 2 from the back. وَاثْنَانِ مِنَ الدُّبُرِ وَهُمَا الْغَائِطُ وَالرِّيحُ. So it says then 2 hadath are from the back, meaning from the anus, and they are feces and gas. So meaning the emission of feces and the passing of gas through the anus. So what he did not mention, I can add here. There's the amniotic fluid when a woman is pregnant and her water breaks, as we say in English. That would break her wuduu. There's also vaginal discharge, so like any emission of vaginal fluid or discharge other than menstrual discharge, because that will require a ghusl. These things would, when they reach the surface of the vulva of the woman, that's when the wuduu would be considered to be broken. Not if it's just inside the vagina but is not emitted to the surface, then it's not considered broken until it appears at the surface in such a way as if she was wearing some panties, it would actually contaminate the panties and she would see it there. So that's how she would know that her wuduu is broken. Okay, so there's emission of sperm without normal pleasure that's associated with it. So an example of this would be a man who has sexual intercourse with ejaculation, and then he takes the ritual bath afterwards, and then after having taken the bath, some sperm leaks out of the urethra. So because he already made the ghusl for the cause, which was either the intercourse or the ejaculation of sperm, this new sperm that comes out is not accompanied by pleasure. It's just left over in the urethra. That will break the wuduu, but will not require ghusl. And similarly, if a man ejaculates in a woman's vagina, and then the woman takes her ghusl, and then it leaks out of the vagina afterwards, that also will break the wuduu. And then another example that I can think of is called a metrorrhagia, which is the abnormal menstrual bleeding. So this is a bit of a complicated topic in the Maliki school. You have to have really studied the chapter on menses, but just know that women have a specific number of days per month or not necessarily even per month, that they can, per menstrual cycle, let's say, that they can consider to be menses. And then once she's completed those days, if the blood is still being emitted, it's not considered to be menses from a legal point of view, and therefore she would have to make ghusl, and then if the blood comes, it would break her wudu, unless it's present half the time of the day or more. So that's another example of something that breaks wudu. And now I can't think of any other ones, so I think that those are it for the hadath. Now the causes of hadath. So he says, وَأَمَّا أَسْبَابُ الْأَحْدَاثِ فَالنَّوْمُ. And as for the causes of hadath, they are sleep. وَهُوَ عَلَى أَرْبَعَةِ أَقْسَامٍ. And sleep can be divided into 4 categories. طَوِيلٌ ثَقِيلٌ يَنْقُضُ الْوُضُوء. The first is long and deep sleep, and it breaks wudu. قَصِيرٌ ثَقِيلٌ يَنْقُضُ الْوُضُوءَ أَيْضًا. So the second category is short but deep sleep, which also breaks wudu. قَصِيرٌ خَفِيفٌ لَا يَنْقُضُ الْوُضُوء. The third category is short, light sleep. It does not break wudu. طَوِيلٌ خَفِيفٌ يُسْتَحَبُّ مِنْهُ الْوُضُوء. And the fourth category is long and light sleep, from which it is recommended to make wudu. So from this we learn that deep sleep always breaks or nullifies wudu, rather, and that light sleep never nullifies wudu, but that it's recommended to make wudu if the light sleep was long. So what is considered deep sleep? Basically, it is when you would not regain consciousness due to the slightest cause, the slightest stimulus. So, for example, if you're holding something in your hand and you're dozing off, if you were to drop the thing in your hand, if you wouldn't immediately regain consciousness, that's deep sleep. Or if you're sitting cross-legged and you're dozing off, and if when you start tipping over and falling, if that doesn't wake you up, then you're in a deep sleep. Or if you start drooling, or if you would not regain consciousness if somebody walked into the room and you heard some noises around you. So all these are signs of deep sleep. And if it was light sleep, meaning these things don't apply, you would actually regain consciousness, then you consider your sleep to be light. And the reason for this is that if you're in such a deep sleep that these subtle causes wouldn't wake you up, then if you had hadath, such as passing gas would be the main one I can think of, you wouldn't know it if it happened. So therefore you should consider that your wudu is nullified, and you have to remake it before praying after waking up. Okay, so now he continues speaking about the causes. So sleep was the first. Now he says, وَمِنَ الْأَسْبَابِ الَّتِي تَنْقُضُ الْوُضُوءَ زَوَالُ الْعَقْلِ بِالْجُنُونِ وَالْإِغْمَاءِ وَالسُّكْرِ. So among the causes that nullify wudu is the loss of consciousness. I would add also, like, it could be translated as the loss of one's mental faculties as well, even if one is somewhat conscious. Bil junun, so as a result of junun. So junun could be insanity. If somebody had wudu and then they had a fit of insanity or became permanently insane, from that point on they wouldn't have wudu. Or it could also be possession, because junoon comes from jannah, which is the same root that the jinn is derived from. So it could be a case of possession, and also it could be an epileptic fit or any other kind of fit during which a person would sort of lose their right mind, wouldn't be in the right mind. The second one is al-ighma, which would be fainting or coma. And the third one would be sukr, and sukr is drunkenness, but it also applies to other forms of intoxication, except the sort of feeling of intoxication that a person can get from dhikr. If they're in intense remembrance of Allah, you can have ecstatic states as a result of that, and you sort of lose contact with reality. That does not break wudu. But if it's other than that, it will break wudu, such as some people, when their calamity strikes, they become they kind of lose contact with reality because of their anxiety or the shock, the trauma. So a person in a state of shock and trauma, that would also require wudu, because it falls in the same category as sukr here. So, and what we mean by the type of intoxication and drunkenness that breaks wudu is a severe intoxication. It's not just somebody who had one or two beers. We're talking about a person who doesn't know the sky from the ground, and doesn't know what time of day it is. Is it 8 in the morning or 8 at night? This would be the type of intoxication that would break the wudu. Why? Because people that are slightly intoxicated, they still have the ability to know if they had a hadath or not. Okay, so the next thing is actually not a cause. He sort of threw it in there, but the ulama they make that in, like, they put it in the miscellaneous category, and it's apostasy. So he says وَيَنْتَقِضُ الْوُضُوءُ بِالرِّدَّةِ. So wudu is nullified by riddah, which is apostasy. So it's when a Muslim, may Allah protect us from that, basically quits and leaves the religion. So what happens then is that all the good deeds of that person become batil, meaning like invalid, including the wudu. So this is why even if they leave the religion for 10 seconds and remake the shahada, they'll still need to make wudu. And if they had, something that requires ghusl at any time in their life in the past, they would absolutely have to make ghusl as well, because they would be now in that state of major hadath, because their ghusl that they would have made before would be invalid now as well. So the next one is, the ulama usually put it in the miscellaneous category, but if you reflect deeply upon it, it should go with in the two categories, the category of hadath and the category of causes of hadath. So he says, وَبِالشَّكِّ فِي الْحَدَثِ, meaning وَيَنْتَقِدُ الْوُضُوءُ بِالشَّكِّ فِي الْحَدَثِ. So wudu is broken by when you have doubts about a hadath, but also when you have a doubt about a sabab, a cause of hadath. He didn't mention it here, but that's part of it. So this means you know you had wudu. You remember specifically making wudu. But now you don't remember if you had a hadath or a cause of hadath after that wudu. And you're 50% sure or more that you did have that hadath. If you're only, like, let's say 0 to 25%, it's just a hint of a doubt, that doesn't affect your wudu, you still have it. And so this is the doubt about hadath. There's also two forms of doubt that require wudu. The second one is of the three is doubts about wudu. So you remember having a hadath. You can picture it clearly in your head. But now you don't remember. If you remade wudu after, you're about, you could be 50% sure, 60, if you're more towards the 75 and 100 range, then you have wudu. But if it's an even doubt or less, then you need to remake it. And the final scenario is when you're sure about the wudu and you're sure about the hadath, but you can't remember which one came first. You have even doubts about that. Then that will also require wudu. And there's one exception concerning the shak fil hadath, doubts about hadath, concerning a person who's a muwaswis, person who has a lot of whispers and doubts about his tahara, his ritual purity, such that he has these doubts once a day or more. For him, if he knows he made wudu, but then he gets those whispers and doubts afterwards, then he should ignore those doubts, unless it becomes like near certainty or certainty. Then he talks about, and he returns to talking about the causes of hadath. So he says, وَبِمَسِّ الذَّكَرِ الْمُتَّصِلِ. So he says, by touching one's own penis. Al-muttasil means here that it's connected to one's body, as opposed to somebody who had their penis severed, which is a rare thing, which I don't think he should have necessarily put it in a beginner's book like this. But yes, it is a condition that the penis be attached to the person. And so now he talks about in which cases does touching it break wudu. So first of all, there has to be no barrier. He didn't mention it in the book, but if there's a barrier like underwear or towel or pants, something like that, it doesn't break the wudu. So he says bi batin al-kaf. So batin al-kaf is, sorry, I have to show it to our brothers and sisters that are watching it on the internet. So batin al-kaf would be the palm of the hand. Then he says, أو بباطن أصابع, or with the inner face of the fingers. So this part here. أو بجنبيها, or the sides of the fingers. So I'm going through it, combing through it right now. So these are the sides of the fingers, and the fingertips are considered as batin as well. They're considered to be the inner face of the fingers. So basically, the only thing from the hand that will not break the wudu is if you touch it with the back of it, whether the back of the hand or the fingers. That does not break the wudu. So then he does mubalagha, or exaggerates the meaning, and he says walau bi asbu'in za'idin in hassa. Says if you have an extra finger, you have a sixth finger, if this finger had feeling, it had sensation, if it touched the penis with the sides of it or the inner side, it would break the wudu. But that also is a rare case that doesn't necessarily need to be in a beginner's book like this. So now he talks about the final cause, which is the most complex one, actually, which is sensual touching. So he says, وَبِاللَّمْسِ, and wudu is broken by lams, which is sensual touching. وَهُوَ عَلَى أَرْبَعَةِ أَقْسَامٍ, and it has 4 categories. 3 of them have the same ruling, and 1 of them has another ruling. إِنْ قَصَدَ اللَّذَّةَ وَوَجَدَهَا فَعَلَيْهِ الْوُضُوء. So if he touches another person, and now as far as who this other person is, it's actually quite complicated. That one I would encourage you to go to the Student's Guide to Maliki Fiqh to read what those conditions are. But it's usually, yes, between 2 different genders, but it can actually be between 2 women and between 2 men. With conditions regarding, like, does the man have a beard and how old each of the people are. There's conditions that I don't have time to get into here. So in قصد اللذة ووجدها فعليه الوضوء. If he intended sensual pleasure, and what we mean by that is the sexual arousal. So not just touching just for the sake of touching it. You're seeking that sexual arousal and pleasure. Regardless of which part of the person you touch. It could even be their hair or their fingernail. It's something that doesn't even have feeling in them. So if you sought that arousal and experienced it, so you sought it and experienced it, then you must remake wudu. The second scenario, وَإِن وَجَدَهَا وَلَمْ يَقْصِدْهَا فَعَلَيْهِ الْوُضُوء. So if the person experienced it, but they weren't looking for it, they weren't seeking it, they need to remake wudu as well. وَإِن قَصَدَهَا وَلَمْ يَجِدْهَا فَعَلَيْهِ الْوُضُوء. And if a person sought it but did not experience it, then they have to make wudu as well. So that only leaves one category, which is وَإِن لَمْ يَقْصِدِ اللَّذَّةَ وَلَمْ يَجِدْهَا فَلَا وُضُوءَ عَلَيْهِ. So if a person did not seek this arousal and did not experience it through the touching, then there is no wudu to be made. And this is for other than kissing on the lips, because that would always break wudu unless it was done for like purposes of saying goodbye or showing mercy. So basically what you can learn from this is that if you bump into a man or a woman on the street or something like that, that doesn't break wudu unless that actually aroused you. But so for the most part, this is restricted to intimate situations with one's spouse. Or this would be the type of situations where this would actually break the wudu. And in this case, it doesn't matter if there's a barrier or not. So if you touch somebody and you were aroused or you were seeking arousal, even if they had clothes on, it would still break the wudu. Okay, now he gives us a list of things that don't break wudu, and we'll be able to finish just in time. Alhamdulillah, worked out well. So he says, ولا ينتقد الوضوء بمس دبر ولا أنثيين. So wudu is not broken by touching one's own anus, and nor is it broken by touching one's own testicles. ولا بمس فرج صغيرة, and it's not broken by touching the private parts of a young girl. So صغيرة here is not used in like the same meaning that it usually has in fiqh, which is a girl who hasn't reached puberty. Here it's actually a bit younger. It means, yes, from birth up until 5 or 6 years old. I can't remember which of the two it is, but you can find it in the student's guide to Maliki fiqh. So if you're changing your daughter's diaper, then that wouldn't break wudu. Wala qai'in. So wudu is not broken by vomiting. Wala bi akli lahmi jazurin, and not by eating camel meat, because in other madhabs, other schools, they have this. Wala hijamatin wala fasdin, and not by getting wet cupping, which is it's a medicinal practice where they make little incisions in the skin and then they put a glass cup and then they make suction to get the bad blood out. And then fasd is bloodletting, the typical like bloodletting. You might have seen this in movies, like old movies, where they would make a cut, usually in the hand or on the sides, and then they would have a recipient to collect the blood, and then they would patch it up. So they believed that had medicinal properties. So if a person has this done to them, it doesn't break wudu. وَلَا بِقَهْقَهَةٍ فِي صَلَاةٍ, and not if they laughed out loud in salat. Because there's a hadith, there's a story in which this happened to the companions, radiallahu anhum, but in the Maliki school they didn't understand it in the same way as the Hanafis, for example. And for them it does break wudu. وَلَا بِمَسِّ امْرَأَةٍ فَرْجَهَا, and not if a woman touches her own private parts. So this is the mashhur, the dominant position in the madhab, but then he gave a minority opinion here because it's quite common. وَقِيلَ, so usually they introduce minority opinions with qila. It is said, إِنْ أَلْطَفَتْ فَعَلَيْهَا الْوُضُوء, so if she entered her fingers inside the vagina, then she must make wudu. But again, this is not the mashhur or majority position, but it does exist in the madhab. And then he says, Wallahu a'lam, so, and Allah knows best, just to show humility that even though he's a great scholar and knows these rulings, in the end Allah knows best. He's the one who knows everything, the wrong from what is correct. So we have to end here, inshallah. So have another class after this in French. اللهم ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك التواب الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.